Good morning. Welcome to another Fast Tracks webinar. This is a weekly event that we do every Friday at 9 Central, 10 Eastern, where we go over a topic regarding the Fast Track software. This is general training and good review for everybody. You can sign up for these events on our website at goftx.com by choosing the FTx Lifeline hyperlink, scrolling down just a bit to the webinar section, choosing the view webinars, and then this page will let you sign up for newsletters regarding the webinars. It lets you view all the previous webinar recordings, and then also allows you to register for new webinars. So our topic today is going to be the settings of the point of sale. So we can see that I've logged into the POS, and to get to the settings, I first have to have the permission to get to the settings. In this case, I do. The login that I use has permission. So to get to the settings, I will choose Actions, Settings, and Settings. This will then bring up all the settings of the POS. Each tab is broken down to where there are similar settings involved in that tab. This first page will be the receipt printer settings. So going through this, I can choose the printer type. Is it a POS printer or is it a serial printer? Once these are set up, you generally don't have to touch them again. Below that, I have the receipt header and the receipt footer information. You can put in your information for the receipt header and footer. Below that, I have actual receipt options. These are going to be options that have to do with the receipt that prints out. Do I want to print every single receipt? If so, I leave that checkbox checked. If I want to not print that and print on demand, I'll uncheck that. If I want to print the number of items on the receipt, I can checkbox that. That'll print the total number of items that are on that transaction. If I want to print a logo on the receipt, I can checkbox this, and then I can navigate to where that logo is, and it is a monochrome bitmap image is what you'd want to use to put on your receipt printer if you want to use a logo. Below that's going to be the barcode option. What this does is it will print a barcode on the bottom of the receipt, allowing you to quickly return items. It lets you start a return faster, and also show when you scan that barcode, it lets you return the items that are on that specific transaction for the price that they paid. The next option will be, do I want to print the UPC number on the receipt? By default, we're going to print just the description and the retail price. If you have this option checked, it's going to also print the UPC number below that description. Next, I have the option to print the use saved amount on receipt. This will print basically a total savings on that transaction. The next option is it's kind of printer specific. If this is unchecked and you have the print barcode on receipt, and whenever you print the receipt out and it's cutting off part of that barcode, you can checkbox this, extra feed before cut, and that will basically push paper through a little bit more before it uses that printer cut command to cut the receipt. That way, if it was cutting the barcode off, it's not going to cut that off anymore. The next option is enabling a Dvr feed. And if you have a Dvr system that has a serial interface, you can plug that up to the computer and specify what COM port that you plugged into the computer, and this will then basically virtualize the receipt on that Dvr feed. Much like whenever you're looking at the receipt preview in the point of sale, when you scan an item, it's going to populate that virtual receipt like the customer would see. It would be just like that on your Dvr feed. Then you have the option to print no sale receipts and cancel sale receipts. If those are checked, it's obviously going to print that. If it's unchecked, it's not going to print that. Regardless of whether you have it checked or not, it is going to log that, of course, so you can always view like the negative cashier report to view if there were negative actions like a no sale or a cancel sale. Next options will be how many credit card receipts do you want to print whenever you have a credit card transaction, 0, 1, 2, or 3. And then the next option is really printer specific. It's the width of the printing on the receipt. Is it 40 characters, 42, or 44? Most printers, when I've seen, are 44. Then you have the option to test the peripherals. your printer, your cash drawer, and your DVR. Whenever you choose a printer up here, you have a pop command, or if I have an OPOS option, then I can choose the OPOS cash drawer as well, and that lets me assign the printer to a cash drawer. The next area we're going to look at is going to be the scanner settings. This is a very simple, not much to this page. You choose your scanner. It has to be an OPOS scanner. There's not an option for a serial scanner. This lets you test the scanner. And then whenever you're testing, you can actually capture driver's license data. This will let you, if you're having a problem with, like, say, scanning certain driver's license barcodes, you can scan the test scan option here, and then actually scan one of those driver's licenses and then send that to our support team, and we can take a look at that and see why you may be having that problem. The country is supposed to be using like a standardized barcode for all driver's license, but of course states don't always follow those guidelines, so you may or may not have an option. I've rarely ever see any kind of problem with this. It's generally on older driver's license if there is any kind of problem. And then the next option is scale settings. If you use an integrated scale, you can checkbox this and then what serial port is that scale plugged into. All right, the next page will be our display settings. And this has to do with the customer-facing display, whether it be a poll display or a actual monitor. If it's a poll display, first and foremost, it has to be an OPOS device. It can't be just a serial device. You have to choose the poll display from your OPOS device selector. Then you can put a greeting and an end cell. Welcome, thank you for shopping with us. And then there's font sizes. You can change the font size of that. This font size will also change the monitor font size as well. You can, if you have a secondary display plugged in and your Windows option is set to extend, we can go, I'll show you what mine would look like. When you go to your system, and by default, it's going to show your displays. If you have the display set to extend and not duplicate or show only on one, you're going to have the option to run a customer-facing display. So in this case, I have it set to extend, which is what is correct. I can see the model number of my secondary monitor, and then I can then enable that for whenever I'm ringing sales up in the point of sale. It is going to show a virtual receipt for the customer to see if I choose the enable digital receipt. And then I can also place ads. I can have a file directory. I can put that wherever I want. By default, it's going to be the C Fast Tracks ads directory. And I can put images, GIF files, JPEGs, whatever I want in that folder, and it will preview that on the customer-facing display. If you want to integrate with the control center and you have digital signage enabled on your secondary display, this is where you would enable this on the control center. That will then tie that monitor to the control center. And then there's the option to use uplifts. And then if you have uplifts enabled on your register, this is where you choose the resolution of that secondary display, and it will push the ad in that display format, that display resolution. All right, our next area will be register settings. And this is a very busy page. There's a lot of settings here. So we're going to first look at the register number. This is where you specify what register number you're on. This is, of course, for your shifts, for your receipts. It's a very important setting. The next area is going to be the store number, and it's going to show the store number here. Now you can change the store number by choosing that change store number hyperlink, but you generally, this is set up and it very rarely ever changes unless you have some kind of store numbering change. All right, then we can update our store information by choosing the store info hyperlink. This is where we can input like the store name, address, city, state, zip code, phone number, license number, or fax number. The next area will be the Cash Next text. I can change that Cash Next caption. That's a button in the point of sale. I can put that text to whatever I want it to be. By default, it's going to be cash next. Then we have our safe drop settings. To enable a safe drop prompt, you have to first choose this checkbox, and then you can put in your minimum in-drawer amount, your max in-drawer amount, and the prompt interval. The min number, you're generally going to want that to be the starting till value. The max would be what is the max cash amount you want in the drawer. So for example, if I had a $100 starting till and I had a $500 max amount, then I had that enabled, and I wanted to prompt the cashier every, let's say, 2 minutes after they hit that $500. As soon as I hit $500 in the drawer, it's going to then prompt me to drop $400 to get me down to that 100 min amount. If I bypass that and I go to $600, it's going to prompt me to drop $500 in the safe. Whatever that value would be to get me down to $100. I can then have, there's a skip option. I can specify how many skips I'm going to allow before I force the cash drop on the cashier. And then I can also disable the pop drawer on drops. All right, we're going to go over to the right a bit. We have our POS widgets. That is going to be the carton count widget, messages, customers, and to-do list. By default, those are on. I can turn those off. So if I want to disable the carton count and the messages, I can checkbox those, uncheckbox those, and then whenever I'm in the point of sale ringing sales up, I'm not going to see the messages or the carton count. But I will see my customers widget, so I can still do loyalty sales, and I will see my to-do list widget. The next area will be our pay in default text and payout default text. Whenever we choose edit, it's going to allow us to input default text. So every time there's a pay in or payout, the cashier no longer has to manually type what that pay in or payout is for. They can choose from a list of predefined text to save a bit of time. Then we have our POS panels. Now, anytime you do a panel update, editing your buttons or panels on the point of sale, whenever you save that, that's saving it to the physical files. Now, you want to save this also to the database. So you'll come here and you'll choose Save Panels to DB. This will then make it to where if you have a register swap or if you have a secondary or third register in your store, you can simply load panels from DB, and that will load those panels to whatever register you want. It also allows a corporate environment to pull from the store's database and pull those panels that were saved. It's just a great way to simplify having to manage individual computers and their panels. So now we get to our miscellaneous POS settings. Disable weighted barcodes. If I have that checked, that means that I know the system, whenever you scan a weighted barcode, that is a barcode that starts with the number 2. And what that means is in the barcode world, each starting number means a certain thing. Like, for example, 2 means it's a weighted price. 5 means it's a coupon. So in this case, if I had disable weighted barcodes, if it starts with 2, it's not going to get the retail price from the barcode itself. If I have that unchecked, then of course I'm not disabling that. So whenever I scan the weighted barcode, it's not going to look at what I have the price set into Director or the price book. It's going to get that retail price from the barcode itself. So if I want to disable that, if I don't actually utilize weighted barcodes, then I just make sure that's checked. The next option is log off a cashier after a sale. It's exactly that. Whenever I tender a sale, that is end a sale, it's going to immediately log the cashier off. So the next time you need, whenever there's a sale, you have to log back on. This is a setting that's going to be used whenever you generally have more than one cashier sharing the cash till. The next option will be a log off after X number of minutes of inactivity. What this does is, let's say I have that set for 5 and enabled. If the register is idle for 5 minutes, as in there's no activity on it, then it's going to log the cashier off. In order to start a new sale, then we're going to have to log back in. The next checkbox will be Allow Visual Age Verify. If this is unchecked and I have age verification on certain items, whenever I scan one of those items, it's going to force me to either enter a birth date using the age selector that pops up on the POS, or scan a driver's license to get that age. If I had this checkboxed, then I can, of course, change the text, but it also allows me to bypass that age verification. There's going to be a small little button in the bottom right corner of that scan that pops up on the POS that lets me press a button, and it basically bypasses that where I have to punch in the birth date or scan the driver's license. Return to main screen after sale. If that is checked, that means that whenever I tender a sale, it's going to return me back to the main screen, my home screen, ready for the next sale. If I have this unchecked, then whenever I tender a sale out, I'm going to stay on the subtotal panel. Disable buy downs and promotions and price check. What this does is whenever I do a price check on an item, it will not show me if there's a buy down or promotion on that item. I will not see that. Do not pop drawer for $0 sales. It's exactly that. Whenever I have that checked, if there is a sale that is for $0, it's not going to pop the cash drawer. So for example, if I had an even exchange, I did a return and a sale of an even dollar amount in the transaction. If I have that setting enabled, I'm not going to pop the drawer. Show only active items when searching. What that does is if I have inactive items in my price book, as in items that are discontinued, whenever I sell one of the, or whenever I do an item search, and this is checkboxed, I'm not going to see the inactive items in that list. If I have that unchecked, then it's going to show all items, including the inactive discontinued items. Force driver's license scan for age verify. What this does is whenever I scan an item that has a age restriction on it, I no longer have that prompt to manually enter a birth date. It's going to force me to scan that driver's license. So if I can't scan the driver's license, I can't complete that sale. Autoload panels from DB. That is autoload the panels from the database. That is what that does is whenever I first open the POS, as in first before I even log in, when I'm opening the point of sale application, it's going to look and automatically load those panels from the database. So if there's been any changes, it's going to load those panels. So for example, say if corporate sent down some button changes, upon loading the POS, it's going to automatically pull those in. If there's no changes, then it's still going to pull those in, but you won't notice any difference. There's obviously been no changes. Enable large panel sets. That basically allows you to create multiple panel sets and load those larger when you have more than, say, 10 panels. Most of the time you have anywhere from 3 to 5. You have at least 3, your cashier, your main, and your subtotal. If you're going to be utilizing multiple panel sets, the larger size, you want to make sure that's enabled. Use a 16:9 layout. That is for widescreen monitors. If you're using a widescreen monitor, you probably want to enable that. That will allow you to have an extra couple rows of items or button settings in your button editor. If that is disabled, then it's going to assume you're a true square screen, so you're not going to have the extra blank buttons to place buttons on. The next option is forcing a 1024 by 768 resolution. If you have this enabled, then it's going to do exactly that. It's going to resize your monitor display to 1024 by 768. If you're in a widescreen monitor, then you can expect the black bar on each side of your screen. Prompt for price on returns. What that does is anytime I do a return, if that is enabled, it's then going to prompt the cashier to adjust that price. Now, whatever price the customer purchased the item for, that's going to be pre-filled in. That's the default return price. But the cashier does have the power to change that return value. If that is unchecked, then of course it's always going to return for the price the customer paid. Prompt for salesman. What this does is it is utilized for commission campaigns. Whenever you have an item that is on a commission campaign and you have multiple people clocked in to the register, whenever you scan that item, it's going to prompt for the salesman. This way, for those commission items, whomever gets the commission on that, it's not going to default to the cashier. It's going to, if you have a salesman on the floor, it lets you have the option to assign that sale to the salesman. Prompt for name when suspending sales. What this does is it allows you to name suspended sales. If this is unchecked, whenever I suspend a sale, it's going to just throw that sale into the suspended sale list. I don't have an option to identify that by a unique name. whenever I have this setting checkboxed, that allows me to name that sale, such as like the customer's name or some kind of description. That way I know whenever I'm resuming that sale, I can look at the description of that list and that suspended sale list and know what is on that sale just by what I named it. The next options is taxing options. You have your tax manufacturer coupons, buy downs, and store coupons. Each state is different, so each state would handle this differently. If you have this unchecked, let's say you have a $10 item and a 10% tax, and this is unchecked. You're going to apply the coupon or the buy down value to that retail price first before taxing it. So if I have a 10% tax rate and a $10 item, I'm going to have a $1 tax that's applied to that sale. These checkboxes are unchecked. I then apply a coupon of $1 to that sale. That then means my tax is going to be 90 cents. I'm discounting the item before I actually apply that tax or that buy down. If these are checked, it does the opposite of that. It's going to tax the full retail price before the item is discounted. So in this case, in that $10 item and 10% tax rate, I would then have a $1 tax that is charged to the $10 item. Then I apply the coupon for $1. So my subtotal is $10. The next option allows you to over-tender a store coupon. The next option allows you to restrict sales tenders. What this does is whenever you choose this hyperlink, it allows you to say, for example, this is probably used on lottery. I only want to allow the cash tender to be utilized in my lottery department. So I can basically force where credit cards or checks or gift cards can't be used on my lottery department. Only a certain tender can be used. The next option is do not keep age for suspended sales. What that does is if I have an item that has a age restriction on it, if I have that checked, whenever I suspend the sale and I then resume that sale, it's going to prompt for the age verification once again. It's not going to save the age to that transaction. The next option is show $0 kit items. This allows me to, on item kits, if I have an item that is in that item kit that is a $0 retail price, if I had this checked, it's not going to show on the receipt. If I had this unchecked, it will show on the receipt. The next options is prompt for notes on no sales and cancels and voids. Those three kind of go together. This allows you to, whenever you do a no sale, a cancel sale, or a void, it's going to then prompt the cashier for notes. You can input some kind of description of what that negative action was being used for. The next option is show on the price check, show quantity on hand. It does exactly that. Whenever you do a price check, it will show you what you currently have on hand. If this is unchecked, it does not show your current on hand. Now, if you're in a multi-store environment and you have that enabled, that quantity on hand button becomes a hyperlink. You can actually select that and it will show other stores' quantity on hands. So for example, if your store has no quantity on hand, you have 0, but other stores do have a quantity on hand, you can let the customer know, hey, a couple minutes down the road, one of our other stores actually has this on hand. That way you're not missing that sale. The next option is price check show cost. It is exactly that. Whenever I have that enabled, when I do a price check, it's going to show the cost and the margin I'm making on that item. If I have this unchecked, then it's going to only show the retail price. No cost, no margin. The next option is subtract a % discount after a system discount. You more than likely would want to have this turned on. This is a good order of operations. What this does is if you do a manual price discount on an item, it will do the discount after the system discount is applied if that item is in the system discount. So for example, let's say I have an item that is receiving a system discount for 10% off. And I do a 90% discount, manual discount with the setting unchecked on that item. I could theoretically, whenever I sell this item, owe the customer money. You wouldn't want to have that happen. So you want to have that checked, and that would do a correct order of operations and manually it would basically do a manual price discount on the discounted amount after the system discount is applied. Prompt for item on manufacturer coupon. What this does is whenever you scan a manufacturer coupon, it's going to prompt what item is that coupon being applied to. Now, if you're participating in any of the scan data or the retail scan data incentive programs, you definitely want to have that enabled, because the reviewers of those files want to know what items have what coupons applied. The discount child, when parent quantity setting is enabled, that is best explained. I can show you in Director here. When I look up an item, and let's say that I have an item that the child, the subunit, is more expensive than its parent quantity. And what I mean by that is, this is that pack of cigarettes. It is $8.50. When I go to the purchase unit, the carton, the price is $80. Well, obviously, if I buy 10 packs, that's the same as buying a carton. If you look at the price difference here, if I bought 10 packs individually, it would be $85 rather than just $80 for the price of the carton. If I have the setting enabled, whenever I do a 10 at quantity, scan that item, it's then going to automatically discount those child items, those subunit items, those packs, to the purchase unit price, that carton price. So it's going to be a $5 discount effectively. That way, it's the same price whether the customer buys 10 of the pack or one carton. The next option is return use current discounts. This allows you to, no matter what the customer paid on the receipt, if an item is in a discount, it's going to apply that discount on the return. So they could have effectively be getting less money back than what they paid. The next two options have to do with system discounts. I can restrict system discounts to from house accounts. So if I have this setting enabled, a house account does not receive a system discount if that item is in a system discount. The next option is similar to that. If I have a system discount applied on a transaction, I can no longer temporarily price change that item. That's going to disable that where that can't be utilized. The next option is show min date and age. This allows you to, on the point of sale in the top left corner, show the minimum age for whatever you have as your age restrictions. So in this case, I have tobacco and alcohol. It would show what that minimum age would be. The next option is return forms. Whenever you have this checkboxed, it will then enable the return forms option. What that does is you're going to then start keeping track of customer returns. So anytime a customer has a return, you're going to have to get their name and what their return reason was, and it's going to record that return to that customer. The next option is automatically zing the register. You can set a window, a certain time, so I could say like from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. My store could close at 9 p.m. So if the cashier forgot to Z out, then as long as the point of sale is open during this time period, it's going to automatically Z out if there's any sales that have not been Z'd. So if there's sales that have been Z'd, as in the cashier did remember to Z out, then it's not going to do anything at all. It only is going to Z out whenever the cashier forgets to Z out. All right, next page will be our other settings page. This has to do with just kind of random settings throughout the POS. The general settings, whenever you Z out, as in you end your shift, the receipt that prints out from that receipt printer will show your department sales if this is checked. If it is unchecked, it does not. If the register Z is blind, that means that whenever you Z out, that little receipt that prints out, instead of showing tenders on there, it's going to be blind. It's not going to have any data on there at all other than the shift number. The register Z show department groups. When this is checkboxed, it's going to also show your department group sales. So as a note, if you have the Z is blind, that's going to, of course, take away these. It's going to supersede these other two settings, your show departments and department groups. You only want to have one or the other selected. So I could either have this selected or both of those selected or one or the other. Register Z force close suspended sales. What this does is whenever I end my shift, I have to close my suspended sales. I can't actually in my shift until my suspended cells are completely empty. I can either finish the cells out or I can cancel the cells. The next option allows you to, on your receipt printer, whenever you clock in and clock out, it's going to print a little slip of paper from it to show you your clock in and clock out time, if that is enabled. The next option completely disables the time clock functionality from the point of sale. This may be used if you have used like ADP online and you want to use like an online time clock. This, if you have that disabled, it kind of clears confusion where the cashiers may not get, they wouldn't get confused and clock in on the POS but forget to clock in online. The next option is utilizing the biometric reader. If you have a biometric reader plugged in, you can checkbox that, and then you can choose, is it a digital persona biometric reader or is it a touch point? The next option, force a starting till, is exactly that. Whenever I start a new shift, it's going to force me to enter in a starting till. I can't actually ring any cells until I enter a starting till. The next option is unique cashiers per Z. That means that whenever a cashier has rang up a cell on a shift, another cashier can no longer ring up cells on that shift. It's going to force one single cashier to a shift. Use Recon buckets and Register Z. This is going to, on your Register Z, that slip that prints out whenever you end your shift, it's going to show your Recon buckets rather than your individual tenders. An example of that would be, instead of like showing MasterCard, Visa, debit, or Discover or American Express, it's going to show credit cards and just a lump sum total. Detail logging will log every single action the point of sale does in a logs folder. This is generally utilized when by our support team. Otherwise, you probably want to leave that disabled. Force time clock before using POS is exactly that. If this is enabled, you cannot use the point of sale until you actually clock in. If that is unchecked, then you can ring cells up and utilize the POS without being clocked in. Force authorization on all time clock entries is exactly that. Anytime I use a time clock punch in or punch out, it's going to force me to log in, whether it be my employee number and password or a fingerprint. If I have this unchecked, then if I'm already logged in, it's going to know that I'm logged into the register so I can clock in and clock out. Verify checks. If you're utilizing the verify checks functionality from Director, you can have that list be a positive list or a negative list. As in, a positive means I only take checks from that customer list. Negative means I do not take checks from anyone in that negative check list. The next option is house account vendors. If you have a specific house account vendor, you can assign that vendor to a house account. And then on your house account transactions, you can print invoices automatically or manually. And that would be from a regular standard printer, not your receipt printer. Then you have if you have that set to automatic, how many of those receipts do you want to have printed? 1, 2, 3, you can enter in the number of receipts, and that will be from your receipt printer. If you're utilizing a scale, what is your tare weights? You would want to separate those by commas. So if you have 1 tare weight, you can input just that 1 tare weight. But if you have multiple, you just want to separate that by utilizing commas. The next option is days to keep live receipts. This is for the reprint functionality in the point of sale. Whenever you do the reprint receipt button, it's going to show a list of receipts that you can reprint. By default, that is set to 3. You can change that to different values. Now, be aware that the more receipts that you keep, it's going to make that window slower to open because the system's having to read each of those files. Whenever, like if we have 3 set, whenever a receipt is older than 3 days, it's then going to go to the archive, where I can manually pull that out. In the archive, you have a longer number of days. By default, that's set to 30. And whenever the receipts in that archive are older than 30 days, it's going to then truly delete that receipt. Now, you can always reprint that receipt from the eJournal report in Director. This is really just used for the actual physical receipt file on the POS. The next option is breakup inventory. If this is enabled, this will allow the system to not allow a purchase unit to go negative if there's child items. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you have a carton and 20 packs, and on hand you have 0 cartons and 20 packs. this setting is enabled. You scan the carton. Well, the system knows that you can't sell something that you don't have. So it's going to A, sell that carton, and whenever you tender the sale out, it's then going to take 10 from the child item, 10 of the pack, from inventory and move that up to the parent item. So in this case, it will then move that carton. I won't go negative. I'll be back to 0. The next option is enable online pending transfers. It is exactly that. It will enable the online pending transfer module in the point of sale. That is an option to where whenever you're doing transfers, it allows the corporate to review those requests from store to store and approve or disapprove those transfers. The next option is for corporate settings. This is if you're in a corporate environment, you can input the corporate IP address and the store IP address. Anytime you make a change, make sure you choose that update export or INI file. And if you're on your IP addresses, make sure if you're utilizing a port other than 80, you specify that port. So if I'm using port 81, I want to put a :81. The next option is coupon tender mapping. I can manage coupon tender mapping here. I can add different manufacturers to different tender IDs. I can delete those. I can also separate my scanned coupons versus my manually input coupons. So if I want to keep track of scanned coupons versus manually inputting those, I can just change the tender ID here. By default, it's going to be where they're lumped together. If I'm manually keying a manufacturer coupon and scan a manufacturer coupon, those are going to the same bucket. The next option is our gift card settings. You'd input the gift card server settings, which is generally going to be, if you're in a corporate environment, the same as your corporate server. If that server utilizes an SSL certificate, you can checkbox that. Allow manual gift card entry. That allows the cashier to manually punch in the gift card number rather than scanning it. Then there's the option to print gift card on receipt printer. That is if you're not using physical gift cards, you want the receipt printer to handle your gift cards. So if I sell like a $5 gift card with a setting enabled, it's then going to print the gift card barcode and value on a receipt. The customer then can bring that receipt in and it functions exactly like a gift card. The next options will be our announcements and news interval. How often do you want the POS to check for those? By default, those are set for 720 minutes. The next page will be our custom actions. This allows us to build custom buttons, kind of like that. If we look in the background here, our inventory, these buttons here, I can build custom buttons there. And I just enable the custom action 1. I can put a caption, and then I can link to a physical file location on the computer. So if I want to put a button to open Microsoft Excel, I can do that. The next options will be our credit card information. If you're utilizing integrated credit cards, this is where you input that data. There's options for DataCap, Heartland, and Mercury. The most common one is going to be DataCap. You have the option to support EMV. If like you have a register 1 that is utilizing integrated cards and register 2 or 3 that is not, you can assign that register as unintegrated. If your processor uses tokenization, make sure that's checked. You input your merchant ID. You would select the device. What port is that device virtualized as? The primary server. If you're on a register 1, that would generally be localhost. If you're on a register 2 or 3 or any other secondary register, you'd put the IP address of register 1. Terminal ID would be if there's a terminal ID assigned to that pin pad, you'd input the terminal ID. If your pin pad supports signature capture, you can enable that. That will capture a virtual signature. If you allow debit cash back, you can enable that. The next option will be no signature needed on sales less than, say, $25. What that means is on a credit card sale, if the sale is less than $25, don't require the customer to sign for it. Then you have the option to download DataCap parameters, which would be required the very first time you set up integrated card processing, or if you make a change, you have to re-download those parameters. On the Heartland side, you have your 2 different pin pads that are supported. You then choose the IP address as your option and what IP address is that pin pad. what port is that pin pad running on, and that's for the Heartland integrated. And then Mercury, there's the option for your merchant ID, password, primary server. This is for the older style integrated Mercury using the iPad pin pad device. So the next options will be receipt options for your pin pads. These are going to be for your secondary receipts. So if you're printing 2 receipts out every time you do a transaction, it will then show, you have the option of showing your header information on that second receipt. Don't print the item information. Don't print the footer information. Don't print the age verification. Don't print the barcode. Don't print your logo. Don't print the signature line on the first credit card receipt. So basically, this is options to shorten those receipts. By default, if those are not checked, you're going to have 2 identical receipts that print out, which, depending on what information you have keyed in, could be a lot of receipt paper. This allows you to save receipt paper by enabling those options. The next option will be do not automatically prompt for a card swipe. It's exactly that. Whenever you do a credit card transaction, it's not going to prompt you to automatically do a swipe by default. That way you can manually input a card value. The next option is don't show that manual entry button on credit card authorizations. That disables the option to do a manual card entry. So if the card does not swipe or the pin does not read on the pin pad, then you can't take that card. You don't have the option to manually take that. This is really to help eliminate chargebacks. You have the option to next require a minimum sell amount of a certain dollar amount before you allow card transactions. Then you have the option to allow manager override for manual entry amounts greater than a certain dollar amount. So if you have that enabled, say I have a $50 transaction and I'm trying to manually input the card and not scan the card, then this allows me to basically have a manager approval. Otherwise, I can't do that. The next option will be allow credit card fees. This allows us to force a credit card fee. I can do a flat dollar amount or a percentage of the transaction. Here's where I put that fee amount. If it's a flat dollar amount, I can charge a 25-cent credit card fee, or if it's a percentage, I can charge a 2% credit card fee on the subtotal amount. What department does it get assigned to? I'd want to have a department specifically for credit card fees. Then you have the option over here for pre-authorizations only if you're utilizing the Heartland, the HeartSIP application. And that allows you to basically pre-authorize amounts, kind of like for bars and tips. You can pre-authorize an amount on a card, and then when you're closing that sale, it'll automatically add a tip, whether it be a flat amount or a percentage amount. Next options is going to be our loyalty settings. If you're utilizing the no loyalty, select none. Integrated would be what everybody has by default, the integrated loyalty. If the next option is your enhanced loyalty, if you are paying for the premium module, you can enable the enhanced loyalty and it would function after you're set up properly. And then there's the option for the cloud loyalty, which is our Loyal and Save premium application. If you are utilizing loyalty cards and not using driver's license IDs, you can basically input what that loyalty card number would start with. You want to have a consistent number. So whenever you scan that loyalty ID, the system knows it's not an actual item. It's going to, if it starts with like a, let's say a number 1, the system will know if I scan a barcode and it starts with a number 1, it's going to be a loyalty card. You have the loyalty timeout period. If you have no internet, of course, loyalty looks through the internet to your corporate server. How long do you want that timeout to be before it times out and gives an error message stating that the server's offline? So if by default that's set for 60, so that means that if you have internet or you don't have internet or corporate doesn't have internet, it's going to try for 60 seconds before it gives up. If I have that set for 5 seconds, then it's only going to try for 5 seconds. The scan ID length, this goes back to that. If I'm utilizing a loyalty card and not a driver's license, what's the length of that UPC number? Then there's the option to enable old Ohio licenses. If we remember at the beginning of this webinar, I was talking about how states are supposed to follow a standardized driver's license ID. Ohio, for instance, has a very older style license that does not follow that those guidelines. So they did not scan. So we added an option to enable old Ohio license. The next option is print balance on receipt. Whenever you're doing a loyalty transaction, it's going to print that loyalty balance on the receipt if that is checked. Then there's a require scan for redeems. And this setting is put in place to prevent cashiers from doing redeem on a customer they may know that has a balance that they can redeem. So it's going to force you to scan that loyalty ID or that driver's license before that redeem can be done. Our next option will be our reconciliation settings. If your reconciliation, you would like those to be blind, as in the cashiers to not see what they are supposed to have on their shift recons, you would checkbox that. That way they basically count what's on the in their cash till and input those values, and they don't know if there's a variance or not. The shift recon deposits are editable is exactly that. By default, if that is unchecked, those recon deposits are not editable, so your deposit is going to be what the system expects it to be based on the system values. If that is checked, you can change those values. And that goes the same for the safe drops. If that's checked, you can edit those safe drop values. If it's unchecked, you cannot. If you utilize lottery and you want to enable the shift recon to do lottery reconciliations as well, checkbox that. That will enable the lottery reconciliation module. If that is unchecked, it disables it. Lottery uses multiple Zs. That goes in hand with once you have lottery enabled. If this is unchecked, that means that each shift after they Z out, they're expected to count their lottery tickets. Now, let's say we have a scenario where there is 2 registers in a store. If this is unchecked, you really have to force lottery to go through one single register. That way, if there's a variance, you know that single register had the variance. If this is checked, then that means that you can only do your lottery reconciliation at the end of the day or the following morning, and it's going to encompass all shifts from all registers throughout the day. So if I have lottery tickets going through multiple registers, I don't want to have this enabled. That way, if I have a variance, I'm going to know that there's a variance, but I won't know what register or what shift actually had that variance. Lottery uses safe. That is an option to enable the safe functionality where you can keep lottery books and tickets in the safe. Then you have your lottery sorting options. Are those descending, going from like ticket 100 to 99, 98, or are they ascending, going from ticket 1, 2, or 3? Your lottery payouts, do those come from a department or a payout account? You can input that there. The sort lottery option games, do you want to sort that by bin number or a game number? Then you have your lottery sales department numbers and your lotto, which would be your online lottery sale department number. You input those values there. And you have your lottery payout department or account number and your lotto payout department or account number. That's going to be if you're utilizing a department, what's that payout account or that payout department number? Or if you're utilizing an account number for your payouts, what's that account number for that payout account for your lottery or your online lottery? The next option is our Manage Lottery Games. This allows us to assign lottery tickets to lottery bins. When we go back up to the top here, we next have the option to automatically populate credit card totals and shift recons. It does exactly that. If I have credit card transactions, it's going to automatically put in those credit card values, so I don't have to count up my receipts for the credit card transactions. It's going to just input that value there. If I utilize department loyalty coupons, I can input the department loyalty ID, what the department number is. All right, our next area is going to be integrations. If we enable PC payroll, which is where we send PC payroll if you pay for that, this is where you'd put your company ID, your company password, and your time zone that this store is in. The next option is going to be our control center integration. You input the ID is going to be uniquely generated. Your login would be your email address. You have a password and then your base URL. If you're paying for the control center integration that allows you to have digital signage or uplifts, you would want to have this enabled. Then you have the option to enable uplifts and show items on those uplift prompts. Enable Pour My Beer is exactly that. There's a Pour My Beer premium module in Fast Tracks. This enables that module. Then we have our remote settings. This would be for kitchen printing. do I want to enable remote printing? That is, whenever I do a receipt, it's going to print a secondary receipt on a secondary wireless printer. This is a remote print server. This would be, if this is a remote print server, I can select what that remote printer would be, and then I can create the remote printer database. And then the enable remote monitor, which is allowed basically for a secondary machine for like in a kitchen area. It shows you new orders that are coming in. Anytime you make a change in the POS settings, you have to remember to choose the save button, and it's going to force the POS to close. So whenever I save this, it's going to basically say you must restart the POS before these changes take effect. So I will close that, and then whenever I open the POS back up, it's then going to take all those setting changes I just done into play. All right, I hope everybody learned something today, going over all these POS settings. There's a lot of them. Remember that there is a document on the website that covers all of these POS settings, and also there's tons of other documentation on other topics. Also, this webinar is going to be recorded so you can review it at any time. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you.